What's going on, my money mavens and Mullah Misfits? It's me, Joe Knows Money, here for another edition of Ask Joe, where I answer community members' questions that they have left in previous videos, so that not only I can give an in-depth explanation to the questions that they have, but also in hopes that if you are flying a wall during that session, that you can not only glean some information from today's session, but also at the end, we will have a Q&A session as well. So be sure to pack the comment section. Not only will I address as many questions as possible in today's session, but even for those who are rewatching this video in the future, leave a comment, because I am looking in the comment section and I'm picking out those comments or those questions that I think have universal appeal, and I just might invite you on to the next live session, right? So today's live session actually is brought about by a question from a Joe Knows Money community member, Michelle. And the question is this, right? One of the questions that not only I've heard many times before, and that's what all right, so here's Michelle's question. It said, hey, Joe Knows Money, question. So I have a 401k, but I'm no longer with the company. So the method you spoke about, maxing out your contributions, doesn't apply to me, right? So what can I do with my 401k? So first off, what Michelle was referring to was the So the session that Michelle was referring to is a session that I did, a recession is coming, the six steps that can be taken now in order to plan for it. And one of those steps were to make sure that you max out your 401k plan, right? So again, well, what if you had a 401k plan with a previous employer? Now you're left wondering, what are your options to do with it now? So without further ado, I don't want to keep my guest Michelle waiting. I'll add her into the mix and we'll get some more insight. All right. All right, Michelle, looks like you're on mute. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, what's up, Joe? How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. What about you?
Great, I'm ready. I'm excited to see what my options are.
All right, I got some options for you. Please believe. Hey, let me ask you this, Michelle. Maybe we can kick things off by, obviously, I got a little additional background from you, but the viewers don't have the same information that I have. So what prompted the initial question when you were wondering, hey, what can I do with my 401k?
So basically, I'm no longer with that company, and I was trying to figure out what to do with the money at the end of the day. So when you said it, you was like, max out the contribution. I didn't really understand it. So I was like, let me ask him, how can I max it out if I'm no longer with the company? Because maxing out pretty much means that they're going to match whatever I do, correct? Is that
it's going to mean, yeah, so maxing out is going to mean that you're going to put in a percentage of your income into a 401k plan, and the employer may or may not match, right? But certainly people can max out at over $20,000 a year now. So it gives people a great way to save for retirement, right? So what I'm going to share with you today, Michelle, is not only options that are specific to your situation, but then also in general for the viewers, and then also something that you might be able to take away in the future, right? So when you go to that next job and you're like, okay, what can I do when I go from this job to that job to that job? Because most of us, have a lot of different employer changes along the way, right? Between the time that we start to work and retirement. So I think this information is going to be useful for a long time coming, right? So the thing I wanted to do first, though, is just kind of take a small step backwards to make sure that everyone understands what a 401k is, right? So that's important, right? So what is a 401k? So a 401k plan is a retirement savings account offered by American employers that has tax advantages to the savers. And it's a section of the IRS tax code. So when you hear 401k, that's literally the section of the tax code that it applies to. So when a employer has a 401k that you can contribute to, you can put money into it generally on a pre-tax basis, which means if you make $100,000 a year, you contribute $10,000 of that to your 401k. Uncle Sam only taxes you on that $90,000, not on the full $100,000 that a person might make. So that makes it a tax advantage situation for the saver. But then also, once you put that $10,000 into it, right, because this money is coming out of each paycheck and is going into your 401k account over time. But as it grows, that money is growing tax deferred. So you're not going to get a tax bill as you see your account balance grow throughout the years. All right. And then to your earlier question, sometimes an employer does offer a match. And in the industry, what we would call that is free money, right? Because you're just putting in on your behalf. And this is money your employer is willing to put in on your behalf. So don't leave free money on the table, right? So that's the seed of most people's retirement is a 401k plan. All right. So once you set up the 401k plan, decide how much money you're going to put into it, the next question becomes your investment options, your investment choices, right? How to invest this money inside of this tax advantage plan. So that is what allows your money to grow over time. It's not just you put money into the 401k plan and it stays in cash. You put it in mutual funds, and inside of those mutual funds, you're normally invested in some of the bigger name stocks, right? Walmart, Microsoft, Home Depot, Lowe's, Walgreens, the list goes on and on and on. Apple, Amazon, all of the big ones. So then you're taking advantage of the fact that these companies are profiting off of a lot of the products that we are buying, right? One of the things that I want to make mention of, Michelle, oftentimes we use 401k plans as like a generic term, right? So depending upon the type of company that you work for, you may have a 401k plan, you might have a 403b, you may have a 457. These are all different types of retirement accounts. So when I say 401k and somebody else is listening and they're like, well, I have a 403b, this applies to them as well. So I use it as a generic term similar to like Band-Aid or Q-tip or a chapstick or something like that, right? Now, when I was coming up with these terms, I don't know about you, but I thought it'd just be fun for people in the comment section to leave other generic names that they come up with, right? I have folks from different parts of the country who says, Joe, when I refer to a Coke, I'm talking about any number of sodas, right? So I want to flood the comment section with other generic comments or other generic names that people have for things, right? So then that way, as people join, only those who join, only those who have rewatched the video in the future will know what the comment section is all about, right? So chapstick, Band-Aid, Q-tip, Jello, the whole nine, right? So I like to have a little fun in the mix. All right, so check this out, Michelle. You had a very serious question. What can you do with a previous employer retirement account? So this is what I was saying, 401k, 403b, 457, so on and so forth. All right, so we're going to jump into that. For those who haven't already done so, please make sure that you like and subscribe and share this information so other people can get the answer to this question that Michelle has. All right. Also, if you stay to the end of this video, I'll make sure that I share with you two things. One, the number one mistake to avoid when it comes to your previous employer retirement plan. And I'll also give you a bonus tip as well. All right. So here's one of the first things that you can do, Michelle, when it comes to your employer plan. You can leave it at your current employer. All right. Now you can do this if your account balance is over $5,000, Because what happens is if a person has less than $1,000 in their previous employer retirement account, most times the previous employer will just force it out to them. They will send it to them in check form because they don't want to spend the money to administer that small amount of money in their eyes, right? If a person has an account balance that's between 1,000 and 4,000, they may force it into a rollover IRA. But if a person has over $5,000 in the employer retirement account, you do have the option in most cases to leave your money at that employer. The question is, what are the pros? What are the cons? All right. So the first thing is that if you have a good amount of money in there and you like the investment choices that are inside of that 401k, that's an easy way to say, you know what, I spent the time putting together this mix of investments and I don't want to upset the apple cart, right? I already have it set up the way I want it to be. No harm, no foul. If it's not broke, don't fix it. All right. However, there are some risks associated with that, right? One of the biggest ones that I see is twofold. One is that the employer may be assessing you fees that you aren't necessarily familiar with, because how they look at it is when you're employed with us, we're going to absorb some of the cost of administering this retirement account. However, when you're no longer employed by us, we're going to go ahead and pass that along to you because you're not an employee of ours any longer. So you want to look at your account to see if you're paying any extra fees for no longer being an employee. Okay. Just take a pause there. Have you noticed, by the way, and if not, that's okay, because you can go back and look at it. Have you noticed any extra fees or assessments that have been made because you're not a current employee?
I didn't even pay attention to that because I wasn't well versed on 401k. It was something we heard about, and you just, whatever they got going on. See, I didn't even know I should be looking at if the investments that they're doing are okay. You get what I'm saying? It's just that I seen it growing and maturing, and I'm like, okay, but what do I do if I'm no longer with them? So I didn't even know. So where would I go on there to look for the fees and different things like that?
Yeah, so you can do it one or two ways. What I prefer to do, right? Because to your point, hey, if it's not your expertise, it's a little bit hard to go on that search to find it on your own. I would call the administrator of the retirement account, right? So that can be a Charles Schwab, a Fidelity, a Vanguard, a T. Rowe Price, all the other big names as well as small names. And you'll see that on your account statement. So you call their customer service and you ask them for your all-in fees. All-in fees. The reason you use that terminology of all-in fees is because you don't know all the fees to ask for, right? And so there can be 10 different fees and you forget to ask it by the proper name and they won't tell you, they won't volunteer the information. But if you say all-in fees, they'll give you the information, but do this. Once you get it, say, can you point to me where I can find that information myself? Because you want to trust but verify. And I mean, if they don't have anything to hide, which most of them don't, then you can just log on to the account and they can literally walk you through where you can find the information that they just share with you verbally. So that way you can trust but verify.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So one of the other things besides you paying extra fees is the fact that you may just forget that this account exists. Now you may say, Joe, I don't know how that's possible, right? But just think about it. I mean, do you remember your, room number in college? I don't know. Just think about stuff 20 years ago or whatever the case might be, where you're like, man, I thought I would never forget this in a moment. But as time goes by the time you reach 65, 70 years old, will you remember you had this account? And if you do you remember who it was with?
The funny thing is, if I hadn't got a letter in the mail, I wouldn't have known that I was even enrolled in the account because it was a new account to my company. You see what I'm saying? That's crazy.
And that can mean a lot of money, 5-6 figures, or if not more over time, right? So we don't want to leave that. And here's the trippy thing, Michelle. Check this statistic out. You're not alone. 24 million people have forgotten 401k plans, and it has over $1.3 trillion in it, right? So we're experiencing a retirement crisis where people are like, I don't have enough money to retire. But then again, they have some of the money, they don't even know where it is and how to find it, right? So part of the reason people forget is because they leave it with their previous employer, and then that employer may go bankrupt, right? So the nice thing is, if the employer goes bankrupt, your 401k balance is protected from creditors. So that's not an issue. But the issue is, well, you may think, well, I never forget who I work for. But what if you can't get in contact with who you used to work for because they're no longer in business? That's how you can lose track of it. Or what might happen is that a person passes away and their spouse didn't know that they had this retirement account. So they don't even know to look for it.
Right.
Right? Because how often do people have the discussion around, hey, I have this retirement account over here, I have this retirement account over there?
Never,
it
because
happen.
we weren't taught that. Like that was the question. I was no longer with this employer. Like, you just think you lose it low key. You know what I'm saying? People think that once you're no longer with them and you don't cash it out, it's gone. Like, it stays with them. You get me? That's if they didn't send me the letter, Joe, I promise I wouldn't have known that I had it. And then when I had it, I'm like, damn, what do I do with this?
Right. See, but that right there, Michelle, is why I like to do this segment, right? Because you sharing that, A, let other people know that they're not alone, and B, it gives them some, additional like motivation to stay on top of this stuff, to make sure like, oh, okay, like I need to know where this is. And now I know that this money is mine. To your point, what can I do with it? Let me just give people a little bit, 2 pieces of information, which I think is important, is if you can't find your 401k account, you can always check with your state, because your state has a unclaimed property website. Every state has it. It's kind of like the lost and found, right? But it's for 401k plans. And then there's a national registry for unclaimed retirement benefits. So again, we're trying to help folks out, reclaim the money that they work hard to save, right? So the state has one, there's a national registry, and there's a law that they're looking at trying to pass, Secure 2.0, that may create an even better structure. But I want to help people out. All right, so I gave you one, right? The first thing that you can do with your previous employer money is to leave it where it is. The second is that you can roll it over to your new employer, right? So what happens there is that if a person if they have a job or a new job, right? And they're looking at it and they're saying, okay, I have a new job. This new job has a 401k. Can I put it into that? And the short answer is yes, right? Because when you move from one 401k plan to another, it is not a taxable event. It's not a taxable event. You're going from one 401k to another 401k. The only caveat is you got to make sure that your new employer allows for a rollover or a transfer of that money into the new employer. And again, let's say you go from working for a small employer to a large employer, it may be beneficial for you to move that money, because smaller companies, they don't have the bargaining power to have the lowest fees when it comes to the financial services companies that they work with. Whereas larger companies have the bargaining power to say, I'm not paying that. You guys have to charge our retirement savers less money to invest. So that's one of the reasons it may make sense to go from one employer plan to another. The second reason is just for convenience. Again, so you don't have to risk forgetting about that account. You just keep rolling it up like a snowball, right? You keep consolidating it. You go from one employer, you move it to the next, move it to the next. So that way you never have to worry about forgetting about it. But again, like I said, the main thing is just make sure you compare the previous employer fees with the current employer fees.
Quick
That's the
question,
important
bro. What
part.
if you don't have a job in between that? You know what I mean? Like, I don't have a current employer, you know what I mean? So it's just sitting over there with them.
So if you look at the current employer plan, right? So you call them up, you trust but verify, right, on the fees and in the investments and things of that nature, and you look at it and say, you know what, I like it. They're not asking me to move and I don't want to move, so I'll keep it here until I get another job. Right? That is a distinct possibility. Right? So if you like what they're having to say, you can keep your money there.
Okay.
All right. But to that point, if you're saying, nah, Joe, I prefer to know what other options are available, you can roll it into an IRA. So an IRA is an acronym and it stands for Individual Retirement Account. So instead of your retirement account being in a 401k under your previous employer name, now this account is under your name. It's an individual retirement account. Okay. And so you can move your money from a 401k into an IRA. The question becomes, should you move it into a Roth IRA or should you move it into a traditional IRA? All right. So let me explain the difference and certainly chime in with any questions that you have. All right. So with a traditional IRA, you move it in there, it's a non-taxable event. I don't give tax advice. I'm just telling you how it works. Right. So you move it from a 401k plan, traditional IRA, smooth sailing, no problem. If you move it from a 401k to a Roth IRA, you pay taxes on that amount of money that you move over. So just for round numbers, let's say you have $100,000 that's in a 401k, you move that over to a Roth IRA, you're going to pay taxes on that $100,000. Okay, so the question becomes, why would I do that? Well, when you put money into the traditional IRA, it grows tax deferred, but you pay taxes on that money when you take it out in retirement. So once you become age 59 and a half or older, you can take that money out, but it's taxable. However, when you put money into a Roth IRA, it grows tax deferred. So if you started out with 100,000 and it grows to 200,000, it's not taxed. And then when you take the money out, none of it's taxed. All of that growth is yours. So in a situation like yours, Michelle, what you might do is say, I'm currently in between jobs, which means normally we have a higher income when we're employed, lower income when we're not employed, and higher income again. So it could be a perfect time for you to move your money into a Roth IRA because you will be in a lower tax bracket and take advantage of it now versus waiting until you get in another situation where you would have to pay more taxes for doing the exact same strategy.
So basically you're
Does that make
saying
sense?
I can move my little money over to a Roth IRA, and no matter what it grows to from now, I'm just gonna pay the taxes on what I moved over. Is that
exactly? That's 100%.
So tell me this: when you
and the
move,
reason why.
okay, go ahead.
No, I was going to say the reason why it is more beneficial when you're in a transition stage, as long as you can afford to pay the taxes on it, then it makes sense a lot of times, because if you're in a lower tax bracket temporarily, right, boom, you're going to pay less taxes on it versus if you were in a higher tax bracket and you were doing the exact same thing.
Got it.
Does that make sense?
Makes sense. Yep.
Yeah. So that's why people like the Roth IRA, because they're like, man, if I can figure out a way to pay a little bit of taxes on this money, and then I put it into investments and I don't touch it for a long time, all of that money is mine tax free. I'll take it.
Because out the
Right?
Roth, at the end, whenever I decide to pull it, I can pull everything out, and I'm only paying on the smaller amount that I put in, invested, that I rolled over or
Yeah.
moved over.
Yep.
Cool.
Yep. Exactly. Long as whenever you access the money after age 59 and a half, the 10% early withdrawal penalty goes away. Right? If you want to access the earnings on a Roth IRA before 59 and a half, then there's a 10% early withdrawal penalty. But as long as you treat this money, what it's designed for is for retirement, then you're good to go. There's no taxes, no penalties. It's just all you.
Sounds like
Right?
a plan to me.
So I know I said,
But in the account, am I picking my own like stocks and bonds to that now? Because my
yes.
company, so I would be picking what I want to invest in to make sure that the money matures, or you know what I'm saying? I'm
Yes.
responsible for
Yes.
that at that point.
Yes. Well, you're responsible for it now as well, right?
Right.
So whether you keep it in your current employer plan or you keep it in an IRA, you're responsible for the investment choices. To your point, you may or may not have been familiar. Sometimes they will auto enroll you in certain investment choices, right?
Right.
So you may or may not have picked it up front. So here's what most people do. You can do nothing with your investments, and you and I both know that's not a good choice because, like you're saying, it's important to want to grow it. Or on the other end of the spectrum, you can become a investment enthusiast and spend many hours a day researching individual stocks and things of that nature. Or what you can do is what a lot of people do, and what a lot of retirement accounts have is what are known as target date funds. So you can just take your age and say, you know what, I think I'll need this money in 25 years, right? And then you look at it and say, okay, well, we're in year 2022, 25 years from now would be 2047. They'll have a target date fund. They normally go on every 5 years. So they'll have a target date fund of like 2050. And what they're saying to you is, we're going to manage this portfolio to be more aggressive now, but we're going to slowly make it a little bit less aggressive over time. So by the time you get to your retirement destination, it's going to be a lot less risky than what it is today, or a lot less volatile. And what they do is they pick a mix of investments. It's normally like 10 or 12 different mutual funds to put you in. So then that way, if 2 or 3 of them aren't doing so well inside of that package, maybe 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 others are doing well. So that's an easy way for most people who have a desire to invest, but don't have a desire to, spend all their time researching, or just, haven't gotten to that point where they feel comfortable yet. That's a good happy medium. Okay. It's one of those target date funds. And most financial services companies, period, have those available in retirement accounts. And that should be available in a 401k or an IRA. Make sense?
Yes.
All right. So I told people, Michelle, who, if they stuck with us to this point, I would share the absolute worst thing that a person could do with their previous employer 401k plan. And that's to cash it out. Right? So talk to me. I was thinking that it was going to take the hit. Yeah.
1 second.
Sure.
I'm here.
Okay. So did it ever cross your mind? Did it ever cross your mind?
That was my thing. I was like, I'm gonna just shoebox the money. You know what I'm saying? Because I was no longer with the employer, and I didn't know, I wasn't really familiar with the Roth and the IRA. You know what I mean? But that's what my plan was: just take whatever the 20-30% hit and just walk away with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and and unfortunately, over 20% of folks right now, as they switch from one employer to the next, that's exactly what they do, right? So, but the reason not to do that is what you were making mention of. One, if you take that money out prior to age 59 and a half, there's a 10% early withdrawal penalty. But not to mention federal taxes and possibly state taxes. So I've seen it where people were paying 40% or more of the entire pot. So again, I use round numbers, could be higher, could be lower, but $100,000, if a person's paying 40% in taxes, you're giving up $40,000 just to get 60. That doesn't seem like a good trade to me, right? So instead, if you just allow that money to grow and accumulate over time, you'll be good to go, right? You get beyond age 59 and a half, you don't have to worry about the 10% early withdrawal penalty, right? So definitely that's why I call it the absolute worst thing that most people can do is to cash out their 401k, right? Because here's the thing. Have you ever heard of the rule of 72, Michelle?
Kind of, but not 100% versed in it.
Yeah, so check it out. So the rule of 72 is where if you put your investments or you put your money in investments that earn you an 8% rate of return, that 8% rate of return will cause your money to double roughly every 10 years. So think about that. If you start out with $100,000 today, 10 years from now, that rule of 72 would mean that it'd be worth 200,000. 10 years beyond that, that 200,000 will double to 400,000. 10 years beyond that, that 400,000 will double to 800,000. Right? So this is without a person even working. Their money is double, tripling, and quadrupling. So why would you cash it in? Right? So I'm glad you share that, because sometimes people think like, yo, I just need to take this money out if it means I do X, Y, and Z. At least I have the money. I wasn't planning on, I didn't even know I had it in the first place. But that's a low bar, right? We're going for the high bar to say, man, I'm glad I found I have this money, but now let's go ahead and maximize it. So I'm really glad I have this money in the future, right? So I said a lot, just got 2 or 3 more things I'll share with you. What questions do you have so far?
I mean, you pretty much answered them for me, because that was it. Like, I wasn't, like I said, I was planning on taking the money if it was a 30-40% hit and just keep it. You know what I'm saying? Because it's maturing, but I didn't know what to do when you're no longer with that employer. Like you said, it was almost lost. Had they not sent me a letter, no clue. But now I have it on my bookmark. Now I know my 401k is in this, but I'm cool with probably doing the all-in, get the all-in fees and stuff, and see what they're investing in, and just roll it to my Roth with the same thing, because it worked. It wasn't broke.
Yeah, exactly. And here's what you can do. You can, it's just like comparison shopping for anything else. If you're trying to see who got the best price on shoes, whatever, right? Like, or cars, whatever the case might be, the same thing is true of your retirement account. So you can call your current, administrator of your retirement plan. What are your all-in fees? What am I paying for my investments? What am I paying for, you guys administer, and everything in between? All in, I want to know. But then you can call up other companies like Vanguard and Fidelity and T. Rowe Price, some of the other BlackRock, they have iShares. Who I just named are like definitely within the 10 biggest financial services companies in America, right? So you can look and you can do some comparison shopping. Hey, here's the amount of money that I have. Here's what I'm looking to do. I'm trying to put it into a Roth or a traditional IRA. How much is it going to cost me if I choose this particular investment? And then you just go with the option that's best for you.
Oh.
Right.
So where would I find a list of all of those different retirement, agencies or whatever?
So here's the thing. The ones I just named, the reason I named them is they have a reputation of being, or at least having, low cost options.
Okay.
Like Vanguard is famous for being a low cost leader. So what you would do there is you go to vanguard.com, get their telephone number, give them a call. Same thing with
All in fees.
iShares. Yeah, exactly. What are your
All in
fees? Talk to
fees.
me. Do you want this business or not? Right. And so I always look, and you can Google like low cost financial services companies, but the ones that I mentioned, like Vanguard has low fee options, Fidelity has low fee options, T. Rowe Price has low fee options, BlackRock has low fee options. So you just want to make sure. But Vanguard historically has been on the top of the low fee list. Okay. Um, I do have a bonus tip, and this is for everybody, right? Drum roll, please. Right. So here's a bonus tip. Thank you. I appreciate it. Boom. Right. By the way, now would be a good time to double check your beneficiary on file. Think about that, right? Because most people don't remember who they put as the beneficiary. And then if they do remember, they say, oh man, it's an ex of mine who I put as a beneficiary. I don't want that person to get my money if something happens to me, right? So you have to think about that. Like if something happens to you, who do you want to receive this money? Is it your, arch nemesis, or is it somebody who you like, they can really benefit, from this money? And I've seen it happen more times than I would like, where people will come to me and say, Joe, but I knew he wanted, there's people been married like 40 years, but the spouse probably had the first person, and they're like, I know he have wanted them to, or it might have been a sibling that they have since fallen out with. And it's like 20 years ago, he wanted this person to be the beneficiary. Now, not so much. I'm like, it's whatever on paper is what rules the day. Whoever's listed as the beneficiary. So I wanted to put that out there as a bonus tip, because we always think about what happens with the money while we're here, but what happens with it to it if we're not here. Questions on that at all?
Nope. I just went through it with my mom passing, so it was, but we were so solid with everything. It was straightforward and to the point. You get me? So I'm up to date on that though.
Yeah. Well, then you understand the importance of, everyone I ever talked to who had a smooth process when it came to probate, or, being the executor of an estate and things of that nature. They appreciated the people for being so organized and not leaving a difficult situation already and leaving a mess in their lap.
Right.
So then I encourage, obviously you and others to say, all right, I don't want to do that to my heirs as well. I don't want to do that to my loved ones, because I know how much, how difficult it is to deal with the actual loss, let alone a messy situation when it comes to the execution of their will or their estate and things of that nature. So you bring up a very good point. I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, right? Man, you Joe knows money for sure.
For sure, I appreciate that.
Definitely.
I appreciate that. Question for you: is there anything about the initial question that you had, anything that I didn't cover today that you think it might be beneficial for me to touch upon?
You answered it like it was, because we don't know what to do. Like you said, number one, the main point that you touched on was knowing that you even have it. Because we didn't know something. Most people like me probably thought that once I'm no longer with the company, my 401k died with that company. You get what I'm saying? That's
right.
What I thought, Right. And if they, like I said, didn't send me that letter, bro, I wouldn't have known that I was still a part of it, So that was a blessing in disguise, low key. It came in the mail,
Yeah. So yeah, and I think people should know.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think people should know that whenever they put money into a retirement account, that money is going to be theirs. And then when a employer puts a match into the retirement account, an employer can put what is known as a vesting schedule. And what that means is that they can say, hey, for every year that you stay with us, we're going to give you more ownership of our contribution that we made on your behalf, right? So if they put in $1,000 on your behalf, they may say, okay, well, you have we'll give you 20% of that in year one. We'll give you 40% of that in year two, and so on and so forth. So they can do that with their money, with the employer match, but not with your money, right? Your money is going to be your money, whether you're with the employer or not, right? So that's a good thing for folks to know, right?
Yeah.
Well, Michelle, this has been a pleasure. I appreciate you. Yeah, absolutely. I
For sure.
appreciate you bringing it forward. I appreciate you always showing love and support to the Joe Knows Money community. So, as always, if you think of anything else, you need help on something, not only, bring those forward in the comment section, but also encourage others, right? If they have questions and it has a broad appeal, we just might do one of these live sessions also, right?
That was good. I really
So,
appreciate all the knowledge, man. I'm glad that I tuned in on Friday because I'm like, what Joe
right.
talking about now? Let me see. I see recession. People don't believe it's real, Joe. They don't believe this is
Yeah,
going to be a
yeah.
hard recession this time. You get me?
That's why I jumped on. I jumped on and really wanted to share with people uh, what I see. Just like what you're saying is, it's going to get tough for a lot of people, right? But one of the things I want to make sure is that people can never say, "Why didn't somebody tell me?" They can say, "Why didn't I listen?" Right? But if you know somebody, right, like myself, right, 20 years of experience, I'm retired early. I the reason why I wanted to do the Ask Joe segment is because what I found is that most everybody else has an alternative mode, right? They want your business. They want you to bring the money to them. And I'm like, yeah, exactly. So versus me sitting it out saying that's a shame. I'm like, no, you know what? I have the knowledge. I'm okay already. I'm not in business, as you know. I'm retired. So let me give people the information where they're like, man, I can really trust it because I know he's not he doesn't have an end game of trying to profit off of the question that I pose,
Right.
right? So that's why we're doing it. Michelle, I appreciate you. I hope you have a good rest of the day, and as always, be good to yourself. Okay.
All right, Joe. Thank you so much, man. I appreciate it.
All right.
Talk to
Oh,
you
it's my
soon.
pleasure. All right. I look forward. All right, y'all. So Michelle joined us. We completed another Ask Joe session. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. We're going to be looking over the comment section, choosing those questions, asking folks to go live if they want a more in-depth, detailed review. And yeah, just keep on with the questions. And until next time, everybody, please be good to yourselves. And I'll talk with you soon. I got a live coming up next week, by the way. Please check it out.